We have now passed the 100-day mark until the November election. And the Kamala Harris campaign says it raised over $200 million in its first week, with the majority of donations coming from first-time donors. There was also a real surge of volunteers, with over 170,000 signing up in a single week. The campaign held what it called a weekend of action, sending its top surrogates like VP contender and Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro out on the campaign trail. As for Donald Trump, well, on Friday night, he addressed Christian voters at the Turning Point Action Believers Summit in West Palm Beach, Florida, where he tried out some new attacks on Vice President Harris.
She was a bum 3 weeks ago. She was a bum. A failed vice president in a failed administration with millions of people crossing, and she was the border czar. Now they're trying to say she never was the border czar. She had nothing to do with the border. She was the border czar. But if radical, liberal Kamala Harris gets in, and by the way, there are numerous ways of saying her name. They were explaining to me, you can say Kamala, you can say Kamala. I said, don't worry about it. It doesn't matter what I say. I couldn't care less. If I mispronounce it or not, I couldn't care less. Some people think I mispronounce it on purpose, but actually I've heard it said about 7 different ways. There are a lot of ways. There are a lot of ways.
Trump then held a rally in St. Cloud, Minnesota the next day, Saturday, where he is already claiming election fraud, months before any Americans have even cast their votes.
If they don't cheat, we win this state easily, okay? They cheat. They have no shame. They cheat. Do you understand that, you crooked people? They're the most crooked. They cheat. They cheated in the last election, and they're going to cheat in this election, but we're going to get them.
So, Jen, obviously it's inherently offensive to not bother to learn how to pronounce someone's name, and Trump and many of his allies could do this consistently. But that right there, that's dangerous. We have seen this before. He has laid the groundwork months in advance of any voting to suggest that the only way he could lose would be that if it were rigged.
Yeah, I mean, and he does seem pretty nervous, right? And when he's saying it doesn't, he's always projecting. When he's saying it doesn't matter how you pronounce her name, you know that he's actually pretty worried about her. And there was those comments about saying that if he, the only way he's going to lose is if it's rigged, and we know what that brought us last time around. But then also, if I were the Harris campaign, the comments that he made a few days ago, where he said to addressing Christians. So presumably these are, politically conservative evangelical voters that after 4 years are not going to have to vote again because he's going to have done everything that they could imagine that they would want to have happen. Talk about doubling down on an extremist agenda, right? Talk about doubling down on Project 2025. I think that is a big opening for the Harris campaign, and that's what I would drive this week.
So, Sam, let's talk about what we're seeing there, that anxiety from Republicans. It does seem like, for the first time in a long time, Donald Trump's not the central news story in a campaign. Right. Obviously, we spent a long time talking about President Biden and his age and whether he can continue. But here we are, one-on-one, and Trump seems completely overshadowed by Democratic good news, by the enthusiasm on the other side. And there seems to be a lot of anxiety from his campaign, from other Republicans, about just how they're responding, and truthfully, at this point, how they're faltering in their response.
Yeah, I think a few things are happening here. One is he's being overshadowed, which I don't think sits particularly well with Trump, who likes to be the center of attention. Two is the money, I think, can't be overstated. Raising $200 million in grassroots donations over the course of a week is unheard of. I think that if you're the Trump people and if you're Republicans, that's something to be very concerned about, because that money is just going to keep going. Third is, I think the rollout of J.D. Vance has been rough. I just think objectively it has not been what they've wanted. He's kind of become memeified already. And then I think the fourth thing is, and this is something my colleague Mark Caputo captured in his piece that looked at how they're responding to this Kamala Harris boomlet, is that Trump kind of views politics as downstream from culture. He obviously is a product of TV, and he was able to manipulate that and use that to become a political figure. And I think what he sees in Harris's rise is that she's becoming a cultural phenomenon. And I think that's very difficult for him to process and deal with because it can be very politically potent. And it's causing them to have difficulty adjusting. They've planned this whole campaign around Biden, and now they have to revamp it around Harris. But it's not like you can just attack her sort of as a traditional liberal, which they're going to do. You have to now attack her on a variety of different fronts because she's becoming a cultural phenomenon, too.
Yeah, to say that J.D. Vance's rollout has been rough is pretty kind there, Sam. We're going to have much more on that in a little bit. But first,
let's get to be kind, okay?
It's a very generous way to start the week, I suppose. But we're going to get more to that in a minute. But right now, though, we want to bring you the moment that Jen just referenced, where Trump told that group of religious conservatives in Florida that if he were to be elected president this November, they will never need to vote again.
And again, Christians, get out and vote. Just this time. You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed. It'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian. I love you. Get out. You got to get out and vote. In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote.
Now, a spokesperson for Trump's campaign released a statement on Saturday trying to clarify the comments, writing that the former president was talking about uniting this country and bringing prosperity to every American. We can sure fact check that. Reverend Sharpton, let's get you on this. There are a couple of interpretations here about what Trump meant. One is what we just floated, this idea that, because I'm going to give you everything you need these next 4 years, don't even bother showing up. And that, I think for many sets off alarm bells. Or there's this idea that, well, maybe we won't even have any more elections 4 years hence. There are some Democrats who warned that that's what Trump meant. His campaign pushed back against that idea as well. But just talk to us as to what you saw there and how worried are you?
I'm very concerned. First of all, if you take either interpretation, their justification, which doesn't really land well, or those of us that fear he meant what he said and said what he meant, either way, it's a danger to this country. If he's saying he's going to give the far-right Christians what they want, it is frightening at best. And if, in fact, let's remember, he said twice, Jonathan, we're going to fix it. Well, if you are dealing in a climate where they're trying in some states to stop drop box for voting, where they're trying to limit early voting, fix it can mean exactly what they're doing in many states, changing a lot of the voting regulations, changing a lot of the voting access. And I think that he said out loud what he intends to do. He intends to set a situation, working with the right-wing governors, to where voting will not matter. He will have it fixed. He said it. And I see where his campaign has tried to clean it up. They didn't address him saying, fix it. We're going to fix it. He said it twice.
Yeah, so at least let's talk about this split screen where on the Democratic side right now, no doubt, a lot of enthusiasm. And sure, some of this could just be the honeymoon phase. Vice President Harris has only been on the ticket for, the presumptive nominee now for a week. But the money's rolling in, the volunteers are there. It's everyone, it's all anybody is talking about right now is Vice President Harris and how they feel good. Democrats feel good about this campaign. And we have a faltering Republican side at the moment, but at the same time, some pretty dark, ominous warnings here about how they still think they could win.
Well, and President Biden's decision to drop out of the race completely shook up what should have been the glow from the Republican National Convention. So while Donald Trump does have the bump among his supporters that you normally see after a convention, it was not a storyline last week about things that were discussed as convention. It was about the future. It was about the prospect of Kamala Harris as the new president for the Democrats. And so we were in Wisconsin for Morning Joe focus groups, and it really was just staggering how different the vibe was from when I had been there previously, 6 weeks earlier. There was 6 weeks ago, voters were really depressed, Democratic voters, and now they are energized. They might have some qualms about Vice President Harris. She might not have been their first choice, but she is now. And they are in and they're activated, and it's going to be interesting to measure. You know, Trump had, obviously, at the RNC, that was quite a fervor there. His supporters are always enthusiastic, but can Democrats actually match that this go round is the question.
We'll have more on your focus groups a little later in the morning. And it should be noted, though the timing was inadvertent because President Biden was really trying to stay in this race, but by dropping out when he did, after the Republican convention, that really did blunt momentum that Trump would have had from the RNC. And to talk about now making the Harris campaign the centerpiece. And instead, what are we talking about from Republicans? His running mate. And that rollout not going all that well.